how do you design a well-being economy? And so first, what I started to think about is words really matter. And, I'm French Canadian. And when I do these discussions in French, the different word for economy and economics are very, very different. So you wouldn't be able to accidentally interchange them. Whereas in English, they often are, right? Oh yeah, the economy is doing this and the economics behind the economy. And we're kind of co-opting the two. So I figured, well, let's at least start with the difference between economy and economics. So the word economy, I think some of you might know, comes from ancient Greek times. This is Aristotle. So again, still a very Western philosophical worldview, but at the time it wasn't as kind of divided yet. It was quite a while ago. And Aristotle was discussing the idea of oikos, which was your home, so oikos and nomos, to manage your home. And home has a very broad definition. So it can be, the planet as a whole. It can be your literal house and your family life. It can be the city and the place you live in. And it can even be your inner home, the journey inside. So over the years, all that concept, that interconnected concept, is very broad. But stewarding that is basically what the word means. So humans have always and will always practice economy. So we're not wanting to not do economy. We do economy. We trade stories. We make things. We exchange them. We trade them. Right now we're doing a form of economy. I'm telling you some stuff. Later you'll ask me some questions. We'll have a dialogue. That is economy. That's everything that happens around us. So it's basically the cumulative result of the way you live your life and the way everyone around you lives their lives. So economics, as a word, it's referring to how we think about economy, right? So our 7.5 billion stories, our experience and choices, how we live this concept of economy, how we experience it. So it's basically the study of humankind and the ordinary business of life. And in a way, if you think an economy should only be about converting nature to money using cheap labor, then you're going to design the economics and the model and the rules and the theory to support that way of thinking. Okay, so when I'm referring to a well-being economy, as we're going to get in, that's the outcome. But then, and yes, we might say, well, to have that, you need clean energy and you need these sustainable things. That's absolutely right. And then you eventually need a set of rules that supports that. So like I was saying earlier, that current algorithm, how quickly do you convert nature to money using cheap labor? It doesn't have a planet in it, doesn't even know there's a planet. So you can sort of see the visual representation of that, way of thinking of economy on the right. So some of you have taken economics class, probably have seen this, right? Households, industry, goods, services, consumption, wages, factors of production. There's no human beings, and there's certainly not a planet. And yet this is supposed to explain how everything in the world, the way we trade, the way we do economy, that's it. There's nothing more. That's all we need to know. So of course I was in Waterloo, Southern Ontario, giving this talk. So I actually put some nice little Montreal Canadian references. But this has come, over the last year and a half, I've done some town halls all across GTA, also in BC. And I asked Canadians, straight out, what's the purpose of the Canadian economy today? And that little face from that little guy in the middle there, that's what I got. Silence and that face. But when I ask Canadians, what would you like the purpose of the Canadian economy to be? Whoa, like I got flooded, all kinds of answers is coming out all over the place, just like a Toronto Raptors parade, everyone cheering. And all the answers, the commonality was, of course, they were about qualities, the quality of my life, the quality of the education, the quality of life that the kids will have in the future, all about qualities. And so like I said, if we kind of go back to this, I'm really drumming this algorithm down for you. How quickly do you convert nature to money using cheap labor? Where in that algorithm can you account for qualities? Doesn't exist, okay? And I'll take a pause there because it's important to know the history of this code. So if you take a little programming analogy, we like to put little codes together. Programmers will sit and program code. This code was programmed in the 1940s, 1944, basically, was where it was institutionalized. And what was happening in 1944? There was a war. So the end of the Second World War. And a few, the let's call it the people who, I guess, the countries who won the war, can you ever really win a war, came together and said, we can't have another war. This is horrible. Like, so hundreds of millions of people dying. This is absolutely horrible. We cannot do this again. So how do we make sure it doesn't happen? So that was the intent. How do we make sure war doesn't happen again on a global scale? And the theory went, the more nations trade with each other and the more nations trade, the less chance you have for global war. And they were essentially proven correct. Everything else afterwards was beyond the original intent. So they weren't even able to imagine all the repercussions and those little butterfly effects, right, of going ripple through the system. So it wasn't that these people were evil or bad. They just had one cultural reference, white Anglo-Saxon European perspective, and it became the dominant perspective of how to run the world. So I say that story because it's a great little moment in time. Apparently all the politicians are saying that we're at war with COVID. We're at war, we're on a war footing. We have the War Measures Act being discussed. We have war powers. Okay, fantastic. So let's repeat what we did at the end of the last war. Let's gather together and figure out the code we want for the post-COVID era. And that's where we stand today. So at the moment, before COVID, you had a lot of discussions, and we still have, about the clean economy, the green economy, the just economy, the sustainable economy. So remember when I said that there's a difference between the word economy and economics. So this is all great. We need these things. These are absolutely great, but these are outcomes, right? And they're incompatible with the economics of today. So if you ever tried, does anybody, I don't know, no one can just jump in and say it, but if you've ever tried to run an Android app on an Apple iPhone, doesn't work so well. So imagine all the environmental and social policy, social justice, environmental equity, all those things. Imagine them as apps. And you're trying to run that app on a system that doesn't even know what you're talking about, has no code, has no way of running that. So you might get some band-aids for a while, here and there, environmental policy, clean some air, clean some water, but you're still always fighting the predominant code of the operating system, which remains how quickly do you convert nature to money using cheap labor. So at the foundation, we joined a kind of global alliance called the Wellbeing Economy Alliance. And it's a constellation. It's not there to try to have a particular agenda. It's a constellation linking to like-minded groups all over the world, exchanging stories, and in a push to kind of start putting together what could be well-being economies. And what are the rules? What's the code that you would need to implement to start putting that and supporting that long term? So basically, it is all about the update. When you have your iPhone or your smartphone saying you need an update, you don't tend to ignore it. You actually click on, okay, allow the update. Otherwise, eventually, nothing will work. So that's what we're about. And this was all started by a group of countries and jurisdictions. So from New Zealand, Iceland, Finland, Scotland, Wales, all these jurisdictions at the government level started to get together not that long ago and said, okay, there's kind of something wonky with this obsession with domestic product. We need to figure out actually an economy that actually delivers well-being for people. And of course, the well-being of a New Zealander might be slightly different than the well-being of an Icelander, and that should be okay. And so, of course, they were doing that with the OECD over the last 2 years. And now suddenly under COVID, it's like, whoa, okay, so we've literally just paused the old algorithm. How do we make sure we don't bring it all back, right? We want to bring new back. We want to update. We want to innovate. And like I said, this is all because if you want a well-being economy, at the end, outcomes that generate for you well-being, qualitative, measurable well-being, you need well-being economics. You need the code. And so if we all agree that the purpose of the Canadian economy should be to serve you, to generate your well-being, then you have to start looking at, okay, what are these algorithms and the mathematics and the equations? What's our relationship to economy? And how do we think about the economy going forward? So if we want an economy that integrates and internalizes connection, a sense of belonging. Imagine today in our isolated world, belonging and connection is really a hot commodity, right? You can code that in if you wanted to. Again, this is all a human construct. Code it in. You want an economy that embraces participation and democracy in different ways and really, really involves people at the decision-making level. Code it in. If you want an economy that understands, acknowledges, works with and within nature, actually knows that there is something called a planet, code it in. If you want an economy that is about equity and fairness and justice, code it in. If you want an economy that acknowledges, embraces, brings all that dignity together, the dignity we all deserve, code it in. You know, we're seeing that in our long-term care homes these days, right? Like really seeing what happens when you don't value eldership, you don't value the dignity of the elders in our society. So in the end, a lot of these pillars and more, if we so choose, these should be the outcomes of an economy. We can code that all in to a new economy.